Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Wednesday, November 29th, 2023, getting towards the end of November. Let's see. Yeah, so I guess our Friday show will be the 1st of December. And then we all have to get Advent calendars to put alongside our NAFTA refrigerator calendars. I should have put that on. That's going to have to be on my gift list this year. Wait a minute. I'm not going to mention it because now, all right, I don't want everybody sending me a whole bunch of things I can only use. I'll just have to do my own shopping for it. But I need to go back to the NAFTA calendar for the fridge with every single holiday on it. It has to be some sort of holiday freak calendar. Or maybe there's a, day of the day calendar. There is one. I mean, they're online. Don't waste paper, I guess, printing things like that. But all right, I do want to get back to that. That has sort of, I liked the idea of having the calendar with the official holidays of Canada, our neighbors in Canada and Mexico, and keeping track of what they might or might not be celebrating. In most cases, I mean, most of the holidays that were marked on there for the United States are things like, oh yeah, I guess that's a day. All right. Well, at any rate, I don't know. I always found that fun, and that's the end of that. It's no longer fun. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here with you on a Wednesday morning, and winding up November. It's been okay. There's nice prisoner exchanges going on. There's considerably less fighting happening as the truce, are we landing on the terminology of truce, has been extended, and that is good news, although now I understand Israel getting upset with the way something about the way Qatar is conducting itself as the broker of these negotiations, though recognizing, listen, we want to get this exchange done. We want to take everything we can, all the benefits available to everyone from this truce and these prisoner exchanges, and let's get them done and let's get people home safe. And then, although they menacingly say, then we'll settle accounts afterwards, which I hope, but, means, well, we'll write some angry letters. And maybe they will limit it to that. They don't really need to open any other no more fronts in any wars would be a great idea, I think, at the moment. But they are in war mode. So it's a little worrisome to hear them say that. And hopefully it's just posturing, but we would have hoped for less posturing, too. That could be nice. Anyway, I can't tell them how to conduct their international relations. I don't even live there, so don't look at me. All right, plenty to catch up on today, of course, and we'll check in with Greg Dworkin, see how he's feeling today, but certainly check in and get a couple of stories. I happened to get an update via social media yesterday from Joan, and you probably saw it there too. In case you were wondering about Joan and her absence yesterday, her dog is the issue, and I don't know how many dogs she's got, but they had to put their dog down after many, many years, and so she memorialized that at least on Blue Sky. I think I saw it yesterday, but she sent me a note ahead of time, and I expressed my condolences, and you may want to do the same. Check out Blue Sky for her message there. Always a difficult thing to do, but she's okay. Her human family members seem to be okay as well. So in case you had any worries about that, it's not even a head cold. It's just something else entirely. So, all right, we'll see how I hold up. We have infectious disease, low grade infectious disease in KITM World Headquarters. I'm doing my best to avoid it, but I think it's catching up with me. Hopefully, when it does, it's mild and passes in a day or two and doesn't interfere with our operations here. I'm doing all the things that you're supposed to do, so we'll see how it goes. It's not COVID, so that's good news, or at least it's not one of those COVIDs that shows up on the tests. I don't know what's happening with weird variants. I did see somebody mention anecdotally on social media that they had COVID and it didn't show up as COVID on the home test, and that they were claiming that it was some sort of chiefly gastrointestinally manifesting form of COVID. And so I don't know whether that's I know that there used to be discussion frequently of some of those symptoms occurring with COVID, but I hadn't heard the claim that it resided so much in the gastrointestinal system that it didn't show up in the home tests, which are nasal swabs. That sounds like it might need some investigation or talking to a doctor. But now I also see my weather app, of all things, is informing me that, yes, there's a new concerning variant that I guess was first marked in August and is rapidly spreading throughout the United States because nobody's doing anything to mitigate the spread of COVID anymore. But, yeah, there we are. I guess it is time to start talking about bringing back Trump so that we can make this disease awful again. I should make a hat that says that. All right, Greg Dworkin is here. We'll check in. And, Greg, tell us how you're feeling today. How's the health today?
It's a little bit better.
Good.
Hopeful, depending upon coughing, that determines how long I get to stay on the show. Luckily, we have this funny cough button that you can't see that I get to push.
Do you have an actual button, like a separate thing, or is it just the button on your
It's the mute button.
Oh, okay, because I've got
That's
one
what
of
it's for, so you can clear your throat and cough.
Yeah, I try and use that occasionally, although usually I use the edit button afterwards when I say, I couldn't get it in time.
Oh, I forgot, yeah.
Mid-sentence.
Anyway, we're going to combine all of the disease
button.
and dog stories and tell you that my aging but very frisky Abby is doing a great job in fighting off a Giardia infection.
Oh.
Which is something you get from eating animal poop.
Oh,
and then
I've never had
you
that.
start pooping like there is no tomorrow, and that was bad for a couple of days. But a quick stool sample to the vet, identification of the parasite, getting the proper medicine, and 36 hours later, she's much better.
Okay, well, glad to hear that. Not so much about the poop eating. I didn't want to hear about that, but that's breakfast for you.
Well, there's a lot of stuff you don't like to hear about, but I'm just telling you, sometimes in the middle of the show, Abby will come and beg for attention. Okay. And normally we ignore her, but in this particular case, if she wants to go out, she's going out. I'm just telling you.
All right. Yeah, what's no doggy door, huh? I don't know. Do people really have those?
Not in Connecticut.
Yeah, okay.
Let 0 degree weather in. That's a great idea.
I always wondered about that. Like I see
Along
those in the
with
movies. Like, what are you doing? Well, how come? And high school principals also sometimes occasionally will crawl in those things.
Well, Abby's a big dog. It'd be big enough for a high school principal.
Yeah, all right. Well, I always thought those were a bad idea, but on the other hand, so is having your dog, desperate to pee and poop and then having to do it all over the house. But
anyway, she's a good girl, so you got to
right.
go with what she needs.
Yes.
In any case,
they're good dogs,
let's talk about some stuff.
All right.
Speaking of poop, I want to give you the poop on a book I've been reading, which is really kind of funny.
Clear that poop off the book before you read it.
Yep. Which is McKay Coppin's Romney.
That's the poop.
I picked it up, and I thought, I don't know how much I'm really going to enjoy this, partly because
I'm thinking about poop still.
It's about Romney.
You're right.
So, like, how interesting is that? But what happens is the book gets, and I'm only partway through it, the book gets to talk about, what it was like when he decided to run in 2012 and then some stuff afterwards. And he's got anecdotes about people. Apparently, he was bored. And so as part of his habit, his language, the book says, is PowerPoint. That's his native language. He speaks English as a second language. And he keeps copious notes like a lawyer. Oh. So he started a note to himself, which turned into a journal, which turned into essentially a diary. And Romney, for reasons which are unclear, except probably that he's not running anymore, decided to share all of this with McKay Coppin. So it's just really, really interesting. For example, this is, and I gave you the reference, this is a reference I read last year. But Romney was running in 2012 and figured, he was the one to win and it was his time and this, that, and everything else. They all think that.
Yeah.
He's looking at the competition and not especially worried. And then Rick Perry decides that he's going to get in the race.
Well, that is worrisome.
It was worrisome to Romney because, as the book says, Romney knew that Rick Perry was a Republican dream. He dropped all the last G's in words. In other words, he's a gun-toting, rootin', no G Republican with lots of money and lots of appeal to the base. So he was a little worried.
I can understand.
And this was because he ran as a moderate to win the governorship of Massachusetts. He had this Romney Care thing, which became Obamacare. And that was a big sticking point for him. The Wall Street Journal hated it. And so when Perry got in the race, he was a little concerned that might, interfere with his plans.
Right.
But the other thing about Perry that bothered him wasn't just the fact that he was competition. It's that Perry was an idiot.
Okay, I was going to say that.
Anecdote. So he tells a George W. Bush story, which was also told last year in a different book. George W. Bush told Mitt Romney he thought Perry was dumber than he was.
Well,
people thought I was dumb, said W. Wait until you get a load of this guy.
I'm glad he knows that. All right. Wow.
And I thought, that is just so true. That one of the things you learn about reading books like this is, at least in that regard, they're not as dumb as they look.
Yeah.
They
he was self-aware, right? W was at least kind of aware.
And so that's my lead-in to self-awareness.
Wow.
Because we're going to talk about, remember, on Monday, I told you how Congress opens, if you recall.
Right. Yeah, like the boring details of the morning
there's
session.
The pledge, there's the speaker's journal, there's benediction, and there's a motion to expel George Santos.
As a matter of course, yes.
As a matter of course. That's, House tradition. So it turns out that vote may happen tomorrow. And I say may happen because what happened yesterday is as soon as Congress opened and they had the benediction and the pledge, a couple of people moved to expel George Santos as a privileged motion.
Yes. No, I moved it.
That gives the House 48 hours to vote on it, which is tomorrow.
Okay.
But
that's the weekend for them.
Mike Johnson, who I will call House leadership because it sticks in my throat to call him Speaker. He's only Speaker by accident.
All right.
House leadership didn't want to vote on it because obviously it loses a vote for them. They got a new one because they swore in somebody from Utah in a special election.
Oh.
So they have a 9-vote lead over the Democrats right now, but they don't want to lose any votes.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So they don't want to get rid of Santos, but they know they can't keep Santos. So what they did is they put the vote off as far as they could, which is Thursday, 48 hours. They could have voted today, but they decided not to, in hopes that George Santos would resign. And of course, what does George Santos do? Somebody on Twitter said, given the fact that he's a gold medal winning fencer, it's amazing he decided not to fall on his sword.
Ah, yes. I thought you would challenge someone to a duel, though, or something.
Well, he might, because he's going to get pulled out of there kicking and screaming from Congress to jail. It's really kind of funny. It's a nice story arc there.
I mean, he's already kicking and screaming, and they're not even pulling.
Well worth any Japanese anime series. So Santos won't go quietly, and he's going to get expelled. I mean, they're just people turning on him. They've had enough.
Well,
and then they got this one other vote. They figure they're no worse off, so let's just get rid of him.
I guess so. I mean, that plays, and then of course they'll scream about how unfair it is and how they're going to throw out a Democrat next time somebody accuses someone of something. And even
part of the interesting question is going to be what happens to his district.
Nothing.
It's a purple district. Right. Yeah, it's Long Island, but it's sort of part of Queens too. It's Douglaston and Great Neck, and and generally Long Island is a relatively Republican area.
All kinds of necks.
Little Neck, Great Neck. It's heavily Italian, very ethnic, socially conservative on some things, socially liberal on other things.
Cola.
But Long Islanders for years railed against New York City, and as a thermostatic reaction, wound up voting against what New York voted against, meaning they were Republican when New York City was Democrat. They're border communities and just think differently about stuff.
Okay. All right, that was very generous.
Yeah, stuff, has a lot to do with, like Levittown, blacks aren't allowed to live here stuff.
That's the kind of stuff.
Yeah. But, it's just an interesting place. So it's not a given that if Santos resigns and they have a special election, it goes Democrat. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. Hard to know.
Yes. Right. Difficult to tell. And they don't, I wonder what the New York law is. We're probably not close enough yet to where they can just say, forget it, we won't have a special election. It's a year. To leave them without representation for a year seems like a long time.
So, what I would do if I were a Democrat is say, listen, this is a House seat. We're talking about abortion here.
Yeah.
And, we have a speaker who, wants to get rid of all abortion access everywhere across the country. Don't think he doesn't. Look who he is.
Oh, all right.
And it's really important that your vote count here. So vote for me, kind of stuff. That's,
right.
I think the way to run this. And they might win, but you don't know.
All right. Yeah, but that's probably as good a strategy as you're going to come up with in the compressed time schedule of a special election and in the hoopla of an expulsion. That's likely what it'll be about. You're right.
Also the Republicans and crooks who supported him, so that's all part of it. So three things to watch for Congress, and two of them are not necessarily part of this discussion, but number one is today George Santos' last day as a member of Congress. We'll miss him when he's gone.
Yeah.
Multiple lawmakers moved yesterday to call up measures expelling the New York Republicans, starting a 2-day legislative clock. House GOP aides say the precise timing is unclear, but leaders might see no reason to wait. Santos made perfectly clear in comments on the floor and to reporters yesterday he's not going quietly.
Okay.
That is to say, he refuses to resign.
Right. So he'll be angry and make comments, and that'll be fun. So, all right.
Well, the comments that he makes tend to be, look at what my fellow Republicans are doing.
Yeah, he threatens that already.
That guy's drunk. This guy's having an affair with that guy over there, and they don't even talk about it. And I'm telling you, they're a lot worse than me. So how dare they, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why they might want to get rid of him quick.
Yeah, we don't mind though. Go ahead. And by the way, George, you should have been offering privileged resolutions to expel those drunk people.
Yeah. Now, why in a legislative body like this, people would feel obligated? Perhaps you can explain, because I don't get it. Why people would offer multiple resolutions. The Republican Ethics Committee chair offered one. Why do you have to have other ones too?
Oh, you don't. But everybody wants to say, I did it. I wrote that, or I had one of my own. I don't know. They want to claim it.
I get why the Democrats would want to do it, but
why other Republicans, just to be able to say at home, remember that guy that got expelled? I did that. Well, they didn't actually vote on your resolution. They voted on the other guy's resolution. Yeah, but mine was identical. So
on the other hand, why would a Democrat offer a resolution which might get Republican backlash when you can get Republicans to vote on a Republican resolution, taking out the partisan issue entirely?
Yeah, right.
In a divided House with only a few votes between the two groups.
Well, you know how much it costs to file one of those resolutions?
What does it cost?
So, zero. So, they're like, well, if I think I can get any mileage out of it, let's put someone to work. Or and a Democrat at home can, with the local Dems, say, yeah, I filed a motion to, filed a resolution to expel him. But, Republicans, they stole it and put their own name on it. And they were going to push the Republican one instead of mine. But, I was there first. So to whatever value they can extract from that, I guess they will.
Yep.
But all right.
So Matt Glassman follows procedure and other things in Congress.
Yes. That's his problem.
Notes that the resistance to expelling Santos illustrates two general pathologies of the modern Congress: way too much deference to precedent, and way too much deference to the judiciary. Like, we can't do anything because he's not been found guilty by the court of law.
That's okay. The judiciary also thinks they can't do anything. So
well, if that were the case, there'd never be such a thing as an impeachment. Both reinforce the increasing lack of agency and sense of responsibility among members. But you know why. You taught me why. It's candidate in a box.
Yes.
Maybe Santos shouldn't be expelled. But if that's the case, defend it on the merits. Stop telling me that past Congress has waited for judges to decide. Because honestly, in most expulsion cases, they didn't.
That's probably...
So don't tell me your hands are tied. Give me a break.
That's the truth. That's a fallback position. But also very often remember that judges will say things like, the question of expulsion is up to you. You know, that's a political decision for the political
question of whether Trump
branch.
should be on the ballot is a political one, not for the courts.
Well, that too. They won't
touch
anything.
The question of George Santos is for the courts and not for us. Hey, guys, make up your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even with the second, actually both probably, but the second Trump impeachment, I remember very clearly Republican senators saying, listen, if he's guilty, we need to let the courts the courts are the forum for this. And of course, you see how well they're doing with adjudicating that question. But therefore, we can't or shouldn't impeach him or vote to convict.
He's going to get convicted on a whole bunch of stuff. But,
yeah, we hope so. Of course,
that's a different segment.
By the way, he'll be appealing all of that by insisting that that a lot of it is political in nature and ought to have been settled by Congress and not the courts.
No, it was settled by Congress. One of his arguments is this is double jeopardy.
Right. Yeah. So, well, any argument, any spaghetti he can throw.
Argument, but it's an argument made nonetheless.
Yep.
In court, and therefore it's a factual thing to say that that's the argument they're making.
You're right. Okay.
So some of this also reflects a hyper-individualist view of Congress. Santos has been found guilty, therefore we can't judge him, but part of the purpose of the expulsion clause is to allow the House to defend its own dignity, which has political ramifications in a separated system. So Santos is long past the point of bringing disgrace upon the House.
Yes, that's the privilege.
And so the hyper-individualist view only serves to weaken the House as an institution while we await a verdict from our judicial overlords. Now, Glassman is a legislative guy.
Yes.
So, he's certainly not going to allow and accept that the judiciary has the last say here. But he's right.
Yes. Now, sometimes the legislature will decide as a way of ducking the issue. Well, I want to wait for the judiciary to weigh in, and then we'll make our political decision based on the judicial decision. But the power to do this is quite obviously in their hands, and the courts consider it largely to be a political decision, unless they don't like it, which in some cases they occasionally will reverse it. Or fight with the legislative branch about it, like the Adam Clayton Powell case as well. But that wasn't an expulsion case until later, but a denial of his credentials, as I recall, up front. And then that became an issue of, can the House, in fact, reject someone's credentials without basis? And the answer to that actually was yes, but they said was no, for various reasons, and now they've been gun shy about it. So it's not, I guess, if I really believed that any of the members of Congress who were gun shy about expelling George Santos remembered the Adam Clayton Powell case, that would be something. But I don't think that they do.
No.
Some of them were lawyers, and they must have heard
I don't think
about
they
it
know
at
that
some
much.
point. But all right. Well, at any rate, that's history worth reviewing as well, like including for me, because I think I screwed it up. All right.
Well, let's turn from politics to politics.
All right.
So after the break, I'm going to read you a shortish but still very interesting thread by Martin Indyk, who talks about what's going on with the strategic pause that we have right now in the fight.
Are we okay?
In the Middle East.
That too?
But the politics in this country, Logan Phillips, who runs Race to the White House, said, we've got some very early signs that Biden may be turning the corner in the national polls after securing a hostage deal between Israel and Hamas. More on that in a minute. Morning Consult before the hostage release had Trump +3. Now Biden is +1. YouGov had before Trump +1. Now Biden +2. Now, all of that's within the margin of error.
All right. Where it belongs.
And perhaps more to the point, the median price of gas is now below $3 in most of the country.
Right.
And that goes along with something of interest. And here's an argument that it's really the economy and not the hostages at all, and then an argument about So the gross domestic product, the GDP, rose upwardly revised 5.2% annual pace in the third quarter, the fastest in nearly 2 years. Okay. Customer spending advanced at a less robust 3.6, according to the government's second estimate of the figures issued. So, in other words, the economy grew in the third quarter more than first estimated.
Okay. Yeah, quick pause there. We can hear that coming. All right.
So we knew that. And at the same time, Matt McDermott posted this. It's a Navigator poll. And of interest,
okay.
Americans are divided on a factual question. Were more jobs created or lost in the last year?
Created?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, created is the answer.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay.
We want that.
But if you ask the public, Democrats say more jobs are created than lost, 46-16. Independents say more jobs were lost than created, 19-29. And Republicans say 15-39. So in other words, Americans think the economy is so bad we're losing jobs.
Okay.
It's not true. And the point is, that's where campaigns come in and they try to correct the record and let you know what's going on.
All right.
But if Joe Biden truly is more popular, if those polls are correct, that's a big if. If those polls are correct, how can you say it's the economy when people think the economy sucks? There's a contradiction in this logic about explaining why it's not really the hostages that doesn't fit. Right? If you think that it's because Biden's doing better on the economy, people don't think the economy's any better. How can you attribute that? Well, it can't be the hostages because everybody knows nobody cares about what happens overseas. I'm trying to make the point that that's true except when it's not true.
Oh, okay.
And this is one of those cases it's not true. It's all over the news. It's all over the local news. It's about children.
Yes.
Right? People don't really know there are hostages. That's not true.
Oh. All right. Well, some people deny it, but very few.
That's a different issue. It's not that they don't know that this is going on.
Yeah, well, and different people. Okay. Well, we'll be glad to have you back during the break today or afterwards. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin going to give it a shot at a second segment. We appreciate that. That means he's improving.
We'll see how long it lasts.
Okay, but it's more than we've gotten lately. So
yeah, well, getting better. Just good. Abby and I are getting better together.
Yeah, well, you didn't
different
have the
things,
same,
different problems.
Yeah, right. You're not going to want what she's.
You never know.
You don't want to have what she's having.
Don't say never. Never say never.
I'm closing the door on that one. I'm not going to do any of that stuff.
It turns out the bug that dogs get and the bug that people get are different strains, so they don't cross-pollinate, as it were.
Presumably different methods of transmission?
Well, if you pet the dog, it's...
is that enough?
Hand-to-mouth.
Okay, all right. I suppose that could happen then. I'm not going to get on the meal
generally,
plan.
it's rare because different strains. Right. In any case, the Martin Index says about the Middle East, as negotiations on extending the Israel-Hamas pause.
Yes.
Remember, that's what it's called. It's pause.
All right.
Every day you say, I don't know what to call this. It's called a pause.
Abby's pause.
Begin in Doha.
Oh.
Some preliminary observations. Number one, Hamas remains in control in Gaza, capable of enforcing the ceasefire and all the other terrorist groups, including the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the People's Palestine Liberation Front, and all the others.
Yes.
Right. That casts doubt on its claims it can't get its hands on all the hostages. If they're controlling, who shoots off rockets, and if they can control those other groups to that extent, how could they not know where the hostages are?
I don't know, but
PIJ, that's one of the other groups. Submission to Hamas's command is an indication that Iran supports the ceasefire. Note that all of Iran's proxies, including Hezbollah, have ceased firing, despite not being included in the agreement. The Houthis in Yemen are late in getting the memo, but everybody else is paying attention.
Well, they're in Yemen, so,
But they shoot missiles toward Israel.
Right.
Hope the best.
But it takes a little time.
I hope it doesn't land on Saudi Arabia, but if it does, oh well, too bad.
Yes. So PIJ, I guess, is Palestinian Islamic Jihad, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Not Jean Piaget, the psychologist, but PIJ. Because Piaget, I believe, is dead.
Yeah, then there's the Jihad for Palestinian Liberation, and then there's the Liberation Front. You need a scorecard to tell all of these things, just right out of the Monty Python movie. But the point is, it fits with Nasrallah's advice to Hamas at the outset of the war to get a ceasefire. Remember, Hezbollah did not jump in, and Hezbollah is far better armed. Like 10 times the firepower.
Lots more money, I believe.
Hamas gains by holding the IDF at bay, but also from the release of Palestinian prisoners to the West Bank, where its popularity is soaring at Abu Mazen's expense. In other words, the Palestinian Authority, what used to be the Palestinian Authority, is in the West Bank, and Hamas is in Gaza.
They used to be.
People in Gaza are not so happy with Hamas, but people in the West Bank love it.
And they don't have to live with it.
Yeah.
Right.
So if this is all true, then Hamas will be more than willing to pay with more hostages to hold off Israel's resumption of hostilities. That's his interpretation.
All right. I mean, that makes a certain amount of sense. I could see that. That's a big tension there.
Yeah. Netanyahu can see that Hamas prefers not to return to war, but the public insistence on prioritizing the return of hostages is tying his hands. The hostage families. I mean, I have a piece in the Pundit Roundup today.
Yeah.
One of the families of the hostages, had a press conference where part of their family at least is being returned. And they thank everybody.
Yeah. Except
Biden, Macron, your local alderman, whoever you could possibly think of. First selectman in a small town in Connecticut. Thanks everybody for this.
Okay.
Except for one Israeli prime minister who shall remain nameless.
Yes, right.
Doesn't thank him. In other words, the pressure that the families are putting on Netanyahu is intense, just as the pressure that Biden is doing. So the public insistence on prioritizing return of hostages ties his hands, Netanyahu's hands, and pressure from Biden to extend the pause makes it doubly difficult for him to resume the battle. That's why there's still a pause, even though the pause supposedly ran out.
Okay, but they keep saying it got extended.
Right, and this is why, and that's why there's negotiations for under the United States auspices, a bigger exchange of hostages so the rest come out. One theory has it that American hostages are slow to come out because Hamas needs them to keep Biden putting pressure on the Israelis. How far both sides would be prepared to go in hostages and prisoners is about to be tested, but the pressures and incentives for both to stick with it are, for the moment, stronger than the incentives to go back to war. And therefore, the time could be right for a larger swap deal, which is what the U.S. wants.
Okay.
So that's the current situation, and obviously hope for the best. Prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. And that's all good.
Okay. Then we'll take it all.
Part of the reason why, when you look in this country at the protests that are going on about do something, are just so bizarre. They tried to disrupt Rosalind Carter's funeral.
That seems...
Carter and Rosalind Carter actually worked fairly hard to try to get peace in the Middle East.
Right. Plus, she is now dead.
Why are you doing this? This is not going to be well received by the American public
No.
if you're trying to convince them of the righteousness of your cause.
That's true. That seems like a likely mistake. But
first of all, why
they
there?
didn't succeed.
Why her? And second of all, why this? Just
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
no, and I'm sure at the time the thinking was, why this? Why anything? Because you do everything you can always, everywhere because of the
Well,
nature
I don't
of the
understand
situation.
PayPal either.
But yeah, I mean,
Or the people that throw, paint on art pictures and such. Yeah, I don't get it.
Right, that's true. They did seem. I think they stopped that because those reasons.
Because it didn't
People
work.
said, that doesn't make any sense. I'm angry
They
at
didn't
you.
say, "Oh, well, I just determined at the end this is the wrong thing." No, they didn't do it. They don't do it anymore because it doesn't work.
Yeah, and they ran out of paint money. Possibly. Yeah, well, in the heat of the moment, people do a lot of things that they think are going to be strategic. All eyes will be on this, and then they will see our cause. Yeah, they'll see you getting in the way of the thing they wanted to see go off peacefully, and then they'll be angry at you. I hadn't considered that possibility. Well, you should.
Well, I put aside a couple of pieces on Nikki Haley because there were two pretty good pieces
Excellent.
that I
Everyone
thought were
loves
useful.
Nikki Haley.
Now, Nikki Haley, remember, is running for,
Something.
how shall I put this?
Vice president.
Often in swim meets,
Yes.
you race against another person.
Sure, almost all
Like
of
it's a
them,
two-person
I would
heat,
guess. Oh, I see. All right.
all right? At least at high school level.
Is that right?
That's often how it works. And then you decide who winds up in the finals and so on and so forth. So
all right.
if you didn't do that well, it's not unusual for the swimmer to come home and tell the family, well, I finished second today.
Well, that's good.
Right? I mean,
Unless they know.
what does that mean? It means you lost. That's what it means. But
Sure.
Right. So Nikki
in that
Haley's running
situation.
against Ron DeSantis and Chris Christie and a handful of others to try to finish last. Because they're not
Okay.
going to be the nominee. Trump's going to be the nominee. He's like 45 points ahead of everybody.
Yeah.
But
They should
what is
challenge it
Nikki
to a
Haley's
swim race.
strategy here? She spends all her money on commercials, advertising,
All right.
and all of her time in speeches attacking Ron DeSantis.
I can support that.
Not Donald Trump. $0, zero time.
Yeah, I would prefer that, but I can support attacking DeSantis. Not
Right.
necessarily a great strategy. I just like attacking Ron DeSantis.
Right. So one article is in Financial Times, the Nikki Haley wild card for 2024. Trump is a favorite to win the Republican nomination, but many U.S. voters don't want a return to the 2020 election.
Okay. I'll take the outcome.
Well, they'd rather vote for like the perfect Democrat, but that doesn't exist. So you can't always get what you want, said the aging Rolling Stones,
Yes. They're
Who are
too
as
old.
old
They
as
should
Biden.
stop running. Yeah.
but still performing, and nobody says, "Oh, they're too old."
I do.
Yeah,
Okay.
well,
But it's fun. All right. Well, okay.
so one of
what
the
happens?
points
What is this point?
that Edward Luce makes when he writes this article is that Haley's no moderate.
All right. No. And
She would impose a 5-year term limit on civil servants, send U.S. Special Forces into Mexico, slash Social Security. But the platform's irrelevant. Everybody looks moderate compared to Trump.
I guess
So-
that's true.
Haley should, therefore, in theory, attract some independence.
How's that going?
And Jill Lawrence, writing in the Bulwark, says Nikki Haley is the flip-flop queen. She stands for everything and nothing. How would she handle abortion? How would she handle Trump? Who knows?
All right. Big mystery.
But the point I made to Jill Lawrence and Ed Luce is, look,
Oh.
Haley is different than Trump in a lot of different ways, but one of the ways she's different is she can't run on personality. That's not to say that she doesn't have a personality, but she can't run as a strongman persona.
All right.
She has to run on policy. And what does that mean in 2024? Right? If people don't care about policy, but you can't run as a modern Mussolini, what good does that do you? And the second question,
Is
which
there
is
a way to do
unanswered
this?
by these articles, is what does hardcore MAGA do? If she were the nominee, are they going to turn out and vote for her, the occasional voters that turned out for Trump?
I don't. Yeah, I guess it might depend on who the vice president is. Maybe she fixes the problem that way.
By picking who?
Hitler. I guess I don't know. But
not Chris Christie. Not Ron DeSantis.
Rick Perry.
Yeah, maybe.
All right. I mean, he was earlier mentioned. Yeah, I mean, I guess in that role, like if you're not running for president, if you're brought on for a specific role, I guess you could adopt a strongman persona. Someone could give you the strongman in a box persona.
It's not going to work for Haley, though.
No, not for her. But I guess I don't know. Somehow I think you could make it work since you're running for vice president. Although I don't know that she could pull it off. It would be very difficult to tell misogynist MAGA that you're voting for a strong man, woman.
Yeah, you're voting for a non-white guy.
I mean, they can get past the illogic of it. They do that every day. But there's something, I think, I don't know. So psychologically, they'll have a hard time. I don't understand. How could she be a woman and a strong man? Well, couldn't there be a strong woman? No, there can't. No.
So a lot of the money that she's raising from these Republican donors who have money to throw away, and therefore they are, is a new super PAC who's going to help her get votes in New Hampshire.
Oh.
And that's because in New Hampshire, independent voters can vote in the primaries.
Okay.
But here's a technical thing that we have to remind people of every 4 years.
They're all in the legislature.
Yes.
That's one. Yes.
That's one.
The other?
Well, if you want to vote in a primary, you have to register for that party in New Hampshire.
Oh. So you
got to unregister out to vote in the other primary.
Okay. So independents can vote in a primary, but they have
to remember to do that.
Oh. And you have to become non-independent temporarily to do it?
Yeah. Well, let's say that you think that this year the Republican primary is the really interesting thing.
Okay.
You're an independent who generally votes Democrat, but you want to go mess around. Or you actually find somebody attractive on the Republican side this year. So you go and you vote in the Republican Party. You register as a Republican, and you vote in the Republican primary.
How far
and then
in
you
advance?
Forget about it for a couple of years.
Oh.
Then the next election, there's another Republican primary, and you're not that interested. You want to vote in the Democratic primary. But you can't. You're a Republican.
How far in advance is that deadline? Do we know?
No, it's not far in advance at all, but you still have to remember to do it.
Yeah. I mean, people are terrible.
You have to register back as no party to reclaim the choice of party primary to vote in.
You can't
Every
just
election,
switch direct?
says Michael McDonald, many forget to switch, and they wind up voting in the primary they voted for last time. And then if they want somebody else, like Nikki Haley, but they registered as a Democrat last time, then you get a meaningless write-in vote in the Democratic Party, and that's all you get, and you get nothing else.
This is the office asking you if you want to switch, and you're in Connecticut, so they've got a bad list.
I don't want
to. So you can't. I mean, is it the case that you can't switch direct from one party to another? You have to go back to no party, or I don't know. That seems weird to me, but maybe I have it wrong.
Well, I don't know what the exact mechanism is, but I know you can't just leave it the way it was. You have to do something.
Okay, and I understand that. And by the way, remember that we absolutely have to fight tooth and nail to keep the first in the nation primary here because of the super engaged voter base that forgets which party they're registered with or when the deadline is for switching if they want to. There you go. That thank God we are doing retail politics to people who forget their registration entirely.
Yep.
Okay.
Anyway, just thought I'd remind people of that. So, running is complicated, and running in various and different places can be very complicated.
Yes, it's a real job that you need professional staff to handle, and it wasn't entirely clear in the first time around that Donald Trump was going to be able to manage that.
Right. Speaking of being able to manage, and speaking of Donald Trump,
yes,
this weekend,
this coming weekend,
Trump decided that we shouldn't give up on terminating Obamacare. We should never give up.
All right. Death panel for
Got a lot of
Obamacare.
feedback for that because now it's popular. And he said, I don't want to terminate it. I just want to replace it.
Right. Like the last time with something great. 4 years of I'm 2 weeks away from replacing Obamacare. And he's
exactly.
No one gave him a new box.
Right.
All right. That's
so,
or it's still in the candidate box.
Many problems with that.
Sure.
He can't triangulate on abortion. He can't triangulate on Obamacare. He's going to get pinned down on this. Everybody thinks of him as the person who doesn't have to have an opinion on policy. But the closer you get to actually running, the more important it is. The closer you get to the election, the more important this stuff is.
Okay.
And the other thing, of course, is he always forgets, and most Republicans forget, Obamacare is not care.
Sure.
It's Obama Insurance, which doesn't have a really catchy name.
Right.
Health care, as delivered by healthcare providers, has nothing to do with health insurance. Love your doctor, hate your insurance? You know what I'm talking about here.
Okay. But if you love your insurance, you can keep it.
If you love your insurance and hate your doctor, then, good
you're
luck.
in pretty good shape. I mean, minus not having a doctor.
Get another doctor.
There are a lot.
So fixing Obamacare doesn't provide care. And replacing Obamacare doesn't provide care. So, they can't deliver. It's impossible for them to deliver, which is one of the reasons why they find themselves in the situation. Republicans have breathed a sigh of relief that we finally don't have to deal with this stuff anymore.
Oh.
And Trump says, no, I'm going to make it a major issue.
I got an idea. Why don't they nationalize health care and make sure everyone has it universally?
Yeah.
They could try that. Then they would deliver care. And out of spite, they will do this. Aha!
So he says things, and then people move on to the next thing. There's always the next thing. But Susan Demas in Michigan Advance reminds us, the UAW won the strike. How come Donald Trump doesn't want to talk about it anymore?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's true.
It was a big deal.
He's not on the right side.
It was a master political stroke. He's coming to Michigan.
Yeah, why isn't he just...
Does anybody remember that he was actually in Michigan?
I do. You told me. But I pay close attention to what you say. So, but why isn't Trump... I mean, I guess it's just maybe a matter of time for Trump to go out and say,
it was a big win for Biden, so it's not something he really wants to talk about.
Well, why doesn't he say it was actually a big win for him and that he did it? Like, it's a lie, but...
I'd rather talk about something politically useful like Obamacare.
I guess so. That's his first instinct, certainly. But I guess if he's pinned down or he's on a debate stage, he'll just say, I did that. That was my idea.
So Kimberly Leonard writing in Politico, Trump's gift to Florida Democrats.
Oh, what?
Democrats are fired up about putting Republicans on the spot over health care after 2024. GOP presidential frontrunner Donald Trump said recently he was seriously looking at alternatives to the Affordable Care Act and urged his party to never give up on terminating it.
All right. He just doesn't know what year it is.
Ahead of 2024, Democrats are vowing to protect and improve the law again. So, if you're running in George Santos' district, abortion's an issue. By the way, also your health care.
Yes, which is what abortion is. So, it's pretty easy to make
women's health care is women's health care. And on every facet of it, Republicans are on the wrong side and want to take away more of what you already have. They already did it with abortion. Now they want to do it with Obamacare. I mean, the campaign writes itself.
They don't like women a lot.
Well, yeah.
Well, all right. Problematic for them. There's a lot of them, and they vote and everything.
Right. So, as Aaron Blake pointed out, first Trump said, we don't want to terminate Obamacare. We should never give up. We should terminate it. And then he said, I don't want to terminate it. I want to replace it, which is otherwise known as damage control.
Okay. Well, take over an airport or two and ram a rampart. People will forget.
And then one other thing worth mentioning before I leave, which I'm about to do.
Yes.
My voice is giving out here.
You almost made it.
Anna Bauer from Lawfare.
Yeah.
Had this point to make about Rudy Giuliani. The day before Rudy Giuliani proposed voluntary access to Georgia voting machines at the 2020 White House meeting he had, he met with Kathy Latham, a GOP official who's now indicted for Coffee County breach.
All right.
Remember the biggest counties in Georgia?
Sure.
Early Cook, coffee.
Yeah.
There should be a
Grits
donut county somewhere.
It's
one of many details the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the GBI.
GBI, yes.
Right, or FBI.
God damn it.
Latham had traveled from Coffee County to stay at the Willard Hotel. And in D.C., she had what she described on social media as a meeting with Giuliani.
That's what she described as a meeting in a hotel with Giuliani.
Using words to communicate with each other.
Really?
White House meeting the next day, Giuliani floated proposal to access Georgia's voting machines with insider help, and he wasn't the only top Trump ally with whom Latham met. Also, Michael Flynn and Sidney Powell. And later, Latham escorted a computer forensics team into the Coffee County Elections Office. I'm just saying, Rudy's in big trouble.
Yeah,
he's
so's Latham.
He's getting nailed everywhere. People are turning on him. They're fingering him as the culprit. And I just enjoyed it. I just want you to know I really enjoyed reading that story.
That is interesting. I think I put something from Lawfare about the GBI report away. I'm wondering if it's
they missed it. The GBI didn't pick that up.
That's what it was.
Detail.
That's what the GBI missed.
They seemed uninterested in really following through on some of this stuff for some reason.
Okay. Yes, that intrigued me. So that's still something to figure out. Although reading a Lawfare article, well, that's the whole show.
Right.
So, all right, we'll see if we can distill it down. I was wondering what that was about. The GBI missed what? The connection that she made with the people in D.C.?
Yes.
All right. How? All right.
He didn't want to follow the chain up very much.
That is wild. I don't know if there's an explanation yet for why.
It's like Bill Barr was running the place.
Yeah, I guess. But he was running the FBI, but not the GBI doing their own thing under
who? Brian Kemp?
Yeah, the heroes of the Republic down there.
That's what I'm saying here.
Yeah,
that's
okay,
why
I
it's
got
so
you.
Interesting.
All right, now we have figured out the interesting nugget here. Great. I can't afford to read this thing. It's estimating as a 30-minute read, which is usually 60 for us here. So, but I recommend the article.
Well, you can't read it on the show, but there's no reason why you can't read it in your downtime.
My what? Okay. Well, if I get sick from any strange parasites, I guess I'll use the downtime there and read it. But yeah, we should all scour that thing. I'm really going to have to.
Yeah, Busman's Holiday is the correct expression, but Busman's Honeymoon is a much better book by Dorothy Sayers. So highly recommend it.
How did we get there? Okay.
Well, because, on your time off, what do? Read politics? That's your time on.
Yeah. Well, that was my problem with watching West Wing.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
I need downtime.
Except for MASH, I did not watch medical shows. Come on.
Sure. Right. That's got to drive you crazy, too.
MASH was
medical dramas. Well, the drama was about something else. And it wasn't even a drama. It was a comedy. So easier to take. I could see that. But yeah, I can't imagine as a doctor sitting down and saying, I'm going to watch House, Grey's Anatomy, Scrubs, something. What else? I don't remember.
I mean, they're all good in its own way, but, ER, come on.
That must have driven you crazy. It's not even ER. It's ED, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. See?
All right. Yeah,
you learned something.
Sure. Right.
Anyway, that's it for me. Enjoy the rest of the show. See you tomorrow.
Medical education. All right. Thank you very much. Feel better. We'll try again tomorrow, too, unless...
right now, it's more important that Abby feel better than I do, but so far we're both recovering quite well.
Good. Excellent. Don't keep her waiting. I wouldn't.
That's what I say.
Okay. Well, thank you, Greg. We can handle it from here.
That was her calling me.
All right.
She's on her iPhone. So come on, guys.
She figured out. Yeah, all right. The barking isn't doing it. This is what I'm going to do next. All right. Good. Good dog, Abby. And all right. Good luck to you, Greg.
Girl. Yep. Take care.
Thank you very much. And all right. We understand. You're going to have to break early. Look, the dog is not going to wait, and she shouldn't have to. And besides, there might be a squirrel outside. So, all right, yeah, we'll never get through an article like that. But I did put that one aside. I was intrigued by the headline. Maybe the thing to do is, since there's no possible way for us to get through this even in an entire show, let's try to cram it in the last 5 minutes of the first hour of the show. I'm just sort of curious to see if there's anything we can distill out of here by skimming what the GBI missed in Coffee County at almost 400 pages. And you can see that's not the Lawfare article. This is the GBI report. I noticed that Lawfare published the GBI report about a week ago and said, it's out now and you can read it. And that's all they did, I guess, was publish a link to it, or maybe, I don't think they put it up verbatim. But I figured they were going to try and distill something out of it. But half-hour read is all they could do. And what was interesting is they spent the half-hour reads time number, of whatever the amount of words is there, on what wasn't in the report. A 400-page report, and they still didn't get to this critical thing, which is pretty interesting. And probably, we'll just wait for them to distill this out in yet another article once they come up with a theory as to why the Georgia Bureau of Investigation didn't mention this very important aspect of the connection between this is why this woman and why Sidney Powell is included as a co-conspirator in the Georgia case. She didn't do that much in Georgia, but she was responsible she's basically the linchpin in this. I guess this Kathy Latham was her sidekick in this, even if they didn't, consider themselves to be working together. They clearly did. They were the conduits for this idea. How did they translate the plot to overthrow, essentially the plot to overthrow the government on January 6th in Washington, D.C.? How does that connect with this local action in Coffee County? Not only, we understood the theory of it, right? The people who were plotting this thing in Washington, D.C. thought there was a ton of fraud and had this wild idea that I guess is now getting revived in the wave of articles about what Trump wants to do with the military in his second term, including bringing back Mike Flynn. But it was Mike Flynn who, in December of 2020/January 2021, was advising Trump again, when he should have been in prison, advising him that, we can just seize all the voting machines and we can use the military domestically to force a rerun of the election, which is not something you can do, actually, but to force a rerun of the election in certain states, if not the entire country, but at least in the states that we want to come out differently, we can send in the military and let everyone know that we've got a bunch of guns and you better vote our way this time. Wink, wink. And if that doesn't work, seize all the voting machines and just say, you're not allowed to look at them, but we've looked at them in secret under guard from the military. And guess what? We found out that there was obvious evidence that we'll show you later when we type it, that will prove that there was fraud. And I guess they needed to start somewhere, and they needed a friendly jurisdiction in which the local elections authorities would allow them to get a hold of the voting equipment, because they hadn't yet convinced the military to go ahead and seize it, or that it was something that they should do. So they needed a friendly, and they found one in Coffee County, and that's how she ended up indicted. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. The article does look fascinating, I must say. But, I guess the whole indictment establishes what you need to do in order to bring these charges against Latham, even if you intend just to get her to flip on everyone else. She and Powell, I guess, were the linchpin in connecting the D.C. plot to what happened in Coffee County. And I guess for some reason the GBI just takes their eye off the ball. Maybe it's someone's prompting. I don't know. But somehow they miss, I don't know what, the connection between, but how could they? I mean, I guess that's the real story. When they find out the whys and wherefores of missing these connections, that'll be the real story. But this is quite fascinating, but it's quite detailed and quite long. I may now have to commit to reading it off the air so we can bring some distillation back. But it's quite obvious. There's photos, of course. They couldn't help but Instagram everything or take the pictures and tweet them out. And, it's photos of, look, there's no reason in the world why this local person with no particular influence in Washington, D.C. should suddenly find themselves in the Willard Hotel, in the Trump Hotel, in all of these places taking pictures with Sidney Powell and Mike Flynn. But the connection is, this is the person who holds the keys to voting machines that were used somewhere that we would ordinarily be using. If we had our way, we would be using the U.S. military to seize. And how they would rerun the elections, I'm not sure, but it doesn't really matter. They didn't think that through. And I'm sure they thought, we'll do it on paper because it takes 10 seconds. Whatever. or it's so reliable. But they were clearly enjoying being in the spotlight and having pictures taken of them with the famous people who had President Trump's, quote-unquote President Trump's, ear, and it made them feel very important. And the feeling, it was a two-way street. They needed to gain control of the keys to a county office somewhere, and she had a set. And they made her feel like she was an insider and getting a word in on a national level, and she was going to be a hero of the revolution. Or they were all going to go down and go to prison together. And they probably ruled that last one out because they figured, we'll take over and we'll, I don't know, assassinate the judges that want to send us to jail or something along those lines. It's comforting to know. I really would like to comb through this thing, but there's just no chance that we would be able to get to anything else if we did that. So let's see. I thought I would take a peek at some other things. We'll follow up, for instance, with yesterday's discussion about the Weird and Wild Mike Pence stuff. Aaron Blake wanted to take a look at that for the Washington Post, and he does so under the headline, "The Plot Thickens on a Mike Pence January 6th recusal." But there was at least one or two clarifications in there. There's not much in the way of new news in that. He got what we got yesterday and made pretty much the same thing of it. But as I recall in skimming this thing ahead of time, there was at least one or two things that he clarified that I think I made a mistake on that might help to read his piece here. But do you think Pocket lets me highlight things like that and put it aside for ease of reference? No. You know how many trees would have to be killed in order for me to do this? If I had a staff, though, boy, oh boy, would I have them doing this for me. But let's read the article. As a recap, a reminder of what happened yesterday, this is a good way of doing it. One of the least examined X factors, not Twitter, but, X factors in the January 6th saga is this: the possibility that Vice President Mike Pence might have recused himself from the counting of electoral votes in Congress. Given that Pence ultimately played a decisive role in thwarting Donald Trump's attempts to overturn the election that day, and that some in Trump's orbit apparently gamed out and even desired Pence's recusal, it is valid to ask what might have happened if he had not been at the Capitol on January 6th. We apparently came closer to finding out than we realized. ABC News reported Tuesday that on Christmas Eve 2020, Pence had momentarily decided against presiding, in part because it would be, quote, too hurtful to my friend. Remember that? ABC also reported that Pence has testified that Trump personally suggested that he recuse. The Washington Post has not independently confirmed the reporting, or at least had not by the time Aaron Blake wrote on this yesterday. Not feeling like I should attend the electoral count, Pence wrote in notes obtained by special counsel Jack Smith, according to ABC. Too many questions, too many doubts, too hurtful to my friend. Therefore, I'm not going to participate in certification of election. Pence testified that he reversed course after a conversation with his son, who cited the vice president's constitutional duty, according to ABC. The date of that conversation is not clear, but it came at some point during a trip that Pence took to Colorado, which records indicate lasted from December 23rd to January 1st. It is the first evidence that Pence had actually leaned toward recusing himself and that Trump had personally suggested it. But it is hardly the first evidence that it was under consideration and that certain people on Trump's side had angled for it. We previously detailed the publicly available evidence on that episode, some of which has not received much attention. Here is how the new disclosures fit into the timeline. And you always want to start your timeline with this one, unknown date. Well, it has to be on there somewhere. Trump suggests Pence might skip the January 6th session of Congress, according to the ABC News report on his testimony. But we don't know what date it was that Trump suggested it. Now, the first dated item we have is from early December. Pence and his legal counsel, Greg Jacob, discussed potential recusal and whether Pence has a conflict of interest, according to testimony by Jacob before the January 6th committee. Jacob said Pence asked, "Has any vice president ever recused from the role of doing this on the grounds that they are interested in the outcome of the election?" Pence's staff later reports back that Hubert Humphrey sat out such proceedings in 1969, a nice year to do so, leaving the job to the Senate President pro tempore. That's what I wanted to pause on. I mean, yesterday I was wondering, I think it's the first assumption that the Electoral Count Act and now the reformed Electoral Count Act says, of course, that the joint session would be presided over by the President of the Senate, which is the Vice President of the United States, usually. But in his absence, the Senate presidency falls to the Senate President pro tempore, which is a job that he can pawn off on others, but he's the first backup on that. The Electoral Count Act doesn't specifically say what happens if the Vice President of the United States absents him or herself from the proceedings or is absented, whether it's their choice or not. It doesn't actually say that the job then devolves to the Senate President pro tem, but I guess that's the interpretation of it, and I guess it was in 1969. So I wasn't sure, like, where does that come from? Like, why not the next highest ranking official in the room, the Speaker of the House, for instance? But it seems like the interpretation is that the framers of the Electoral Count Act, certainly for whatever reason, intended for the session to be held in the House chamber and for the presiding officer of the Senate to preside over the joint session, because they hand it to the President of the Senate. But I don't know. It's not entirely clear. I don't know if there's a legislative record on that. And that's not any kind of a compromise like, well, if you're going to have it in the House chamber, you should let the Senate preside, just to make sure that both houses are equally represented somehow. But they have this in the House chamber because that's the only chamber large enough to accommodate both bodies, not because there's any inherent power in having it or prestige in having it in the House. Although I guess it's symbolic. They always like to say, this is the people's house, which means that the Senate is some other creature's house, I guess. But maybe they thought that having it in the House chamber and having it presided over by the Speaker of the House didn't, I don't know what. It wasn't attractive enough for senators to participate? What? Not really sure. Maybe there's some check and balance or distributions of the various powers that might. I was trying to think of some sort of theory for it, but it would just be backfill. Essentially, it may have been just trying to split the difference, and as dumb as that is. But maybe, I don't know. I thought, well, if they're there for the electoral counting, the electoral vote count, if anything goes wrong with the electoral vote count, nobody garners a majority, either because you knew that going in or because, some votes got rejected for whatever reason, discounting what those reasons might be for the moment. That, of course, if you end up with no one with an electoral vote count majority, right? No one gets the 270 necessary to have a majority of the electoral count. Then the mechanism under the Constitution is that the House selects the president, the more important of the two jobs. We have to admit that, as between the president and vice president. The House selects the president. We remember that there's a weird mechanism for it, but the point is that the House would be doing the voting in the first instance to choose a president. The Senate meets and chooses a vice president, and maybe sort of kind of that all makes some sort of balancing sense. It immediately makes more sense for the Senate to be given the job of selecting a vice president, given that the vice president will preside in the Senate as president of the Senate. That makes a certain amount of sense. Why the House in selecting the president could be a number of reasons. Again, it's the whole people's house thing, more direct connection to smaller constituencies, yada, yada. But it's, of course, the more easily gerrymandered of the two bodies, too. They weren't thinking about that, I don't think, when they designed the constitutional system. So that's a kind of a major fault. The Senate would be the less gerrymanderable of the two, but, their political lines get drawn in weird ways. And anyway, you can't divide up the 50 states differently in order to screw with the outcome of the makeup of the Senate. But the fact that every state gets equal representation in the Senate has resulted in its own sort of gerrymandering. or an analog of gerrymandering. Anyway, the idea here was to let the House choose the president. And I wondered whether maybe the framers were thinking, well, if such a huge opportunity exists or such a great power devolves to the House to choose the president directly, you probably should take the incentive to screw with the electoral vote count out of the hands of the House and their speaker, their leader, and hand it over to the Senate. And the Senate will have, I guess, maybe would have some incentive to use the power of the gavel to tamp down on illegitimate attempts to screw with the count such that the House would be able to exercise its very powerful prerogative to select the president, and the Senate, in its jealousy, would prevent that from happening without basis by using the gavel and its power to prevent it from happening. Maybe, but that does seem like an awfully long walk, and maybe the dumber but more immediate explanation of, well, the House gets to have it in their chamber, and the Senate, therefore, has to have some sort of role here, so we'll let them preside. Or it may be that they, whatever it is. I'm not certain. But I guess the working theory is that, yes, for some reason, the interpretation of things is, all right, if the vice president of the United States isn't available, it goes to the next highest Senate representative, as opposed to the next highest ranking person in the room, which would be the Speaker of the House. Ordinarily, as between the Speaker or the President pro tem in the Senate and the Speaker of the House is the higher ranking. But if the Senate President, the Vice President of the United States, is there, she outranks the Speaker. All right. So it makes a certain amount of sense. Maybe that's the highest ranking person in the room gets the gavel. But if that's the case, then the gavel should go over to the other side if the Vice President isn't available. But we've never had to deal with that fight. In 1969, the precedent was give it to the Senate President pro tem. That wasn't what we came here. Well, it was what we came here for from this article. But that's not what this article is about. But that's why I put it aside. I wanted to have that point up for discussion. But where were we? We were reading Aaron Blake's article and the timeline on the Pence decision about whether or not to show up on January 6th. So as we learned, at some point prior to early December, or perhaps in very early December, Trump suggests that Pence might want to skip January 6th. In early December, Pence writes notes to himself and asks his counsel if any vice presidents have ever skipped January 6th, and finds out that they have. And in 1969, the job went to the Senate President pro tem. So then, December 13th, Trump lawyer Kenneth Chesebro, in a memo, floats a detailed scenario in which Pence steps aside. The scenario cites Senate President pro tempore, I guess is the actual pronunciation, Chuck Grassley, or another senior Republican who agrees to take on the role of defending the constitutional prerogatives of the President of the Senate. Chuck Grassley would be the first in line. He could choose not to take the gavel, but it sounded like he was actually maybe interested in doing so. Then, December 23rd, Trump lawyer John Eastman writes an email to Chesebro and others that references not wanting to constrain Pence or Grassley, it says parenthetically, in the exercise of power they have under the 12th Amendment. So there we see Eastman is assuming the possibility that Pence doesn't show, and that it goes to Grassley. Also on December 23rd, a Grassley aide emails a Pence aide asking if there is, quote, any reason to believe that your boss will not preside over the Electoral College vote count. According to the January 6th committee transcripts, Pence aide Paul Teller says that it's, quote, not a 0% chance of that happening, unquote. So on December 23rd, they know that Pence is considering not showing up, and we now know that Grassley now knows that that's the case. December 24th, Pence concludes he will not preside, according to his notes, ABC reported. Then, sometime by January 1st, Pence's son, the Marine, persuades him to preside, citing the oaths they both took to support and defend the Constitution, according to ABC. But we had our discussion about those oaths a little bit yesterday. January 5th, Grassley sets off a brief tempest by telling the media, quote, if the vice president isn't there, and we don't expect him to be there, that's offset by commas. Commas are important. You learned that yesterday. I will be presiding over the Senate. A news report initially casts this as Grassley saying that Pence will be absent from the Electoral College certification, but his actual comments appear to refer to a separate session of the Senate, which his office swiftly clarified. He does say presiding over the Senate, not over the joint session. That was Ira's point, and it was worth sticking to. Anyway, it's worth noting that what may have been a momentary decision by Pence came just after a Grassley aide reached out to his office about such a scenario, and the Pence aide suggested that it was on the table. So this was a possibility that plenty of people had been thinking and talking about. For the better part of 3 years, those Grassley comments on January 5th have spawned theories about how he might have been a part of the plot. The new details in the timeline, as laid out by the ABC report, do not indicate that Grassley was in on anything, and he has flatly denied that he was. Parenthetically, it adds, Grassley and his office have denied ever being approached about such an arrangement. In fact, both the timeline and the testimony of top Pence aides suggest this was off the table well before January 5th. But a growing volume of evidence indicates that at least at some point, a Pence recusal was a real possibility. The question is why? Thus far, there are no definitive answers, but there are clues. Grassley, like many Republicans, kept relatively quiet after the election. He was not a vocal election denier. He noted that the process should be allowed to play out. He said shortly after the election that there could be fraud, but that, quote, I personally haven't seen any, unquote. That would be enough to change the results. But at times, Grassley suggested the election was effectively over. On November 9th, his office told a local editorial board, quote, it appears Joe Biden will be the next president, unquote. A few days later, he pushed for Biden to receive classified briefings in preparation for his ascension. When the Electoral College voted on December 14th, Grassley was asked whether he acknowledged that Biden was president-elect, and he said, quote, I don't have to. The Constitution does, unquote. His office would go on to call Biden the, quote, president-elect, which he was, in a December 22nd statement. Grassley did not join the handful of Senate Republicans and many House Republicans in objecting to the election results on January 6th, and after the Capitol riot, he praised Pence for refusing to, quote, kowtow to Trump's entreaties to overturn the election. In other words, Grassley would have seemed a less than ideal candidate for taking the unprecedented step of trying to overturn the election, a step that Pence ultimately refused to take. At least for now, the reason some people angled for Grassley to replace Pence appears to boil down to the fact that Pence was not fully on board and that Grassley was next in line. Another possible reason is that substituting Grassley and having him help overturn the results might have looked less like a conflict of interest than it would have for Pence, who would effectively have been reinstalling himself as vice president. But, I mean, the idea that Trump was like, we should do something to avoid the appearance of a conflict of interest seems rather amazing and unbelievable. Chesborough wrote in a December 13th memo that politically this will insulate Pence and the president from what will happen next. For it is much easier for someone acting as president of the Senate. Oh, right. What were they doing? They were acting as president of the Senate to defend the prerogatives of the office if he has no conflict of interest other than a partisan interest, which is unavoidable. There is still little reason to believe that the plan to have Pence removed from the equation would have resulted in a different outcome. But as we learn more, it has become clearer that this was a desired variable on Trump's side and that Trump's demand for personal loyalty almost led us down a different and unpredictable path at a consequential time. So just wanted to point out, one, the origin of or a confirmation of the belief that the job would have devolved to Grassley, but also Blake's observation that Grassley didn't offer Trump a great deal more comfort in being able to execute his plan than Pence did. So I guess, even though it might reopen the door to wondering whether or not Grassley really did, in fact, mean that he was going to preside at the joint session, it shouldn't, or it wouldn't likely have mattered if you believe everything that Grassley has said and done along the way. There was no indication that he was any more favorably inclined to allowing or facilitating the Trump coup than Pence ultimately was. But I guess once you find out in Trump world that Pence isn't going to do it, you just cast your eyes around the room and look for any other alternative. Now, if they had had the time to then evaluate whether Grassley was a good candidate and found out that he was not, they may have then moved on to someone else and said, well, someone needs to poison Grassley's coffee or something, or put a deer in the way of his car so that he can't make it in time, and the next person in line would take the gavel. But what's interesting there is who takes the gavel, because ordinarily appointing a temporary Senate president in the absence of both the vice president and the president pro tem, the selection is up to the president pro tem to appoint somebody. So presumably he, at that point, gives the gavel to somebody who will do the same thing he would have done if he were able to make it. And certainly you'd think that he would want to make that appointment if he found, hey, the Trump people have put something in my coffee and put a deer in front of my car. I can't let them get away with this. On the other hand, does the message get there correctly? Or does Johnny McEntee forge something from Grassley saying it's going to be Mike Lee in the chair instead? Who knows? All sorts of intrigues could have come from that, but none of them happened. So anyway, I think that's about as much as we can afford to give to that notion right now. All right, let's see. There are other things that definitely need some more discussion. What is this? I put this aside from Blue Sky. What had happened? Oh, yeah, right. Okay, well, maybe I'll look for a developed story on that one. Just notes to self, essentially, here. But let's try a few other fun things, some of which may fit and some of which may not. I'm going to have to remind myself of a couple of these things, what they are in pocket. All right. You know who's been on a tear lately is Philip Bump. I was led to one or another of his pieces yesterday and ended up clicking on all of the other things posted in the sidebar. And there were several, but let's see if we can't utilize this one to get through this segment. The Biden impeachment push nears the end of the runway with no signs of takeoff. Just to switch gears a little bit, Philip Bump's piece from yesterday had one of his better turns of phrase, I think. And I think I saw him this morning on Blue Sky patting himself on the back about that one, and he should. It was a good one. You'll know it when you hear it, if we get to it. Two things happened Tuesday morning that provide a useful lens into the effort by House Republicans to construct a case for impeaching President Biden. The less splashy occurrence was an interview that Representative Lisa C. McClain, do we know her? I don't know. We rarely hear about her, but Rosalind probably knows her, a Republican from Michigan. Well, she was on Fox Business, and McClain, who sits on the House Oversight Committee, which is, of course, the body that has taken the lead on much of the impeachment effort. And she was asked how much evidence the committee had accrued, and McClain was forced into an embarrassing admission. Nothing. Have you been able to identify any actual policy changes that Joe Biden made as a result of getting money from China? The host asked. I mean, that's the big allegation here. And here's the answer. The short answer is no. That's about as short as it gets. She went on to suggest that this was, quote, what we're trying to get to right now by requesting copies of classified documents that were found last year in an office Biden once used or at his home. That's the link, by the way, of all that stuff. Well, we think he got money from China in exchange for making a policy change of some sort. That would be bad. Do you know what policy it was? No. Okay. Are you sure he got any money? No. Well, why? What is it that makes you think that this is all going to happen? And the answer is, well, we demand copies of secret documents that were found in his office, because maybe the secret that's in them is evidence that he took money from China and changed policy as a result. We don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. That's apparently all they've got. By itself, this is fairly anodyne, which I really thought was not the case. It's actually quite alarming, but maybe in comparison, it's fairly anodyne. A media personality asking a question. This part is anodyne. A legislator answering it. Well, okay, that's in the simplest possible terms. I guess that is sort of anodyne. It was a question and answer. Okay, but it was of some great import, don't you think? But none of this can be extricated from the broader context of who was asking and what McClain's answer meant. Nor can the interview itself be considered outside the overarching impeachment probe, such as it is, including the splashier development, an offer by Joe Biden's son Hunter to answer committee questions publicly next month, an order that James Comer quickly rejected. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. That was nice. Here, I like it. Okay, very radio-ish. All right, let me, by the way, double check on all of the various social media input methods here to make sure I'm not missing any notes from you on the show as they go along. No, looks like we're up to date. Okay, so where were we? Philip Bump. We were waiting to get to that extraordinary turn of phrase, but by way of background, we stumble into the splashier of the two developments from yesterday. An offer by Joe Biden's son Hunter to answer committee questions publicly next month. Now, you would think this would be something that the Republicans would jump at the chance for, but they have not, for various reasons. And I guess, does he explain them here in this? Was this him or no? Others were pointing out, well, essentially, I think they have, well, I don't know. I think that he must discuss this at some point. Right? No, he moves on to a next point. Does he not come back around to this? But there was, of course, no, I guess not. The problem of the hearings for Republicans was that when they have public hearings about these things and Democrats get to ask questions or speak to the evidence as it's being developed there, they end up looking foolish because, oh my gosh, there's another side represented here, and ours is not particularly well thought out. And the Democrats are here and are able to pick it apart on national television. I prefer, Comer says, essentially, the situations in which we can control what's happening and having closed door interviews / interrogations. That's the way we wanted Hunter Biden to appear. Somewhere where we could berate him, develop an official record, but nobody would see Democrats objecting on national television. They would still be there, and they would still be able to object and try to pick things apart, but it wouldn't be on TV. People wouldn't see it, just us. That's why they ended up rejecting his offer to testify on television in public for everyone to see. We want to grill him behind closed doors where no one can see what the pushback is from his side. However, that's not the point that Bump goes on to say. He says, in fact, right here, let's switch back to Fox Business for a moment. The interview in which McClain admitted that this one particular line of argument presented by her colleagues had borne no new fruit was not simply one in which an impartial observer was evaluating the state of play. The interviewer was, instead, Maria Bartiromo, who had spent the past 3+ years obliterating her once solid reputation as a serious journalist. Remember the days when other journalists used to say, well, it's a partisan network, people say, but they're full of serious journalists just trying to do a good job. Well, it really was never the case. But anyway, it was Bartiromo who, in the weeks before the 2020 election, gave Donald Trump an hour to make unsupported, untrue claims about the threat of election fraud. It was Bartiromo who, in the days after the election, gave airtime to some of the wildest claims about fraud. It was Bartiromo about whom, in the same period, a senior Fox executive was talking when he referred in a text message to a host that, quote, has Gop conspiracy theorists in her ear, and they use her for their message sometimes, unquote. It was also Bartiromo who earlier this year began accepting Comer's claims about Biden with credulity. It was Bartiromo to whom Comer admitted that he'd lost track of an informant, although it was later revealed that he apparently accidentally had been referring to someone else whom he had lost, I guess. And it has been Bartiromo who has continuously treated as serious the baseless allegations presented by Comer and his allies. Consider the lead into Bartiromo's question to McClain. It wasn't just about identifying policy changes effected by the Biden administration, although on Bartiromo's show in May, Comer alleged, without offering evidence, that Biden had changed administration policy to suspiciously benefit China. Right? That certainly warrants the dramatic music. Instead, Bartiromo stated that witness testimony is all indicating or suggesting that there could be some serious crime here, like bribery or money laundering. That, unfortunately for her, I guess, is flatly untrue. There are many insinuations, often initiated by Comer or House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, that such things occurred. And now we're getting around to the good stuff. But those allegations, such as the wafer-thin one about a Ukrainian national handing over $5 million, have not accrued any evidence to support them. House Republicans have taken a great deal of testimony from people close to Joe and Hunter Biden, but that testimony has often severely undercut the mainline argument the Republicans are making about Joe Biden's actively and knowingly aiding his sons and brothers' business ventures. Consider this graphic shown as Bartiromo was interviewing McClain. What was on in the background? Well, I'll have to describe it to you, but the headline of it is Evidence Against President Biden. And then a chart, like with 3 little boxes. It's not a chart per se, but it's a graphic image with a picture of Joe Biden touching his head like he has a big headache. And is that, I don't know who that is. Who's the other person in this graphic? I really don't know. At any rate, you got me puzzled with that one. But so this is presented as this. Here's the evidence against President Biden. By the way, the background of this thing is a sort of a reddish background that fades to black up at the top of the screen. That doesn't really matter. But floating down from the sky on this background, this graphic background, in addition to the picture of Biden looking like he has a headache, are dollar bills, or maybe $100 bills or $20. You can't tell what the denomination is, but money is falling from the sky. So that's the graphic presentation. Evidence against Biden. There's all this money. What is the evidence? It's contained in 3 boxes here. One which screams out in a giant enlarged font written in gold, $20 million. It's represented as $20M. $20 million in payments from foreign sources. To who? When? For what reason? None of that, of course, fits in the box. Second box, Hunter Biden's messages and infamous D.C. dinner. Remember? No, I don't. But the Fox people know that. We once said that there was an infamous dinner and there were some messages. And in last box, whistleblower testimony. So here's the evidence against Biden. Are you ready? What do you have on Joe Biden? Well, we have $20 million in payments from foreign sources, from some foreign sources to some domestic sources. Who are they? I don't know. Are they Biden's? I don't know. Did it happen? I don't know. Hunter Biden's messages. What messages? I don't know. Messages. And infamous D.C. dinner. What dinner? I don't know. Dinner. And we also have whistleblower testimony. Oh, yeah? What did the whistleblowers say? Don't know. It doesn't fit in the box. That's the point, of course. It's all conclusory stuff that doesn't actually work or fit together, but that's the graphic on the screen when Bartiromo was interviewing McClain. So, those $20 million in payments, none to Joe Biden, and most of it not even going to Hunter or James Biden, the president's brother, as has been known for a long time. The messages and the dinner, well, the former refers to summaries of 2017 WhatsApp messages in which Hunter Biden claimed to have his father, who held no elective office at the time, present while pressing business partners, although there's no evidence Joe Biden was actually there or knew about the message. The latter, the infamous dinner, refers to a dinner at which both Joe Biden and Hunter's partners were present, although sworn testimony indicates that there was no discussion of business. But it's in a box on the screen, so there you go. Republicans have robustly shown that Hunter Biden intended and attempted to leverage his last name to benefit his business, implying that he could get his father to effect change. But they have also, with much less fanfare, shown that Hunter Biden admitted privately that this was false, and they have shown no evidence that it wasn't. Then there's this whistleblower testimony, which refers to allegations that the Biden administration and the Trump administration went easy on Hunter while investigating possible criminal activity. Washington Post investigations into the question reveal a much more complicated and uncertain picture. But that's it. That's the, quote, evidence against Joe Biden. Per Bartiromo's show, payments not to Joe Biden, actions not by Joe Biden, and claims about influence that have been robustly challenged and that predate Biden's presidency. Importantly, no aspect of that evidence emerged as a result of the, quote, impeachment inquiry launched by then House Speaker Kevin McCarthy in September, while McCarthy's replacement, Mike Johnson, touted the progress made during that probe. Nothing that sits at the center of what Republicans are hyping as potentially impeachable is a function of recent investigatory work. Comer did discover that James Biden repaid a loan that his brother made to him, and Comer did his best to make that into something, but it didn't take. This is why we get things like this question about China. Biden's possession of documents with classification markings became a part of a federal investigation last year after the federal probe of Trump for a more expansive example of such activity became public. Trump and his allies tried to suggest that because Biden had once had an office in D.C.'s Chinatown neighborhood, this somehow suggested that Chinese actors were granted access to those documents. And everybody knows in Chinatown, there's no law for Chinese citizens. There's a little known weird thing about the Constitution that said, here in D.C., we're going to have a Chinatown. And in Chinatown, the Chinese get to do whatever they want. It's in the Constitution. That's about the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life being suggested at this level. But it's a reach of world historical proportions. But as McClain shows, it lets them keep one fishing line in the water. Maybe there'll be a bite. Of course, this has been true from the outset. Now we're getting to that big turn of phrase that he really enjoyed, and I did too. Maybe all of these lines coming from this one rickety boat, Comer at the helm, Jordan as bosun, will actually reel in something. Still possible, certainly, but mostly what has happened is that Comer will pull out an old boot and announce that he has discovered a rare example of the dangerous boot fish. It gets thrown onto the pile of tires, cans, and other garbage that Jordan tells Fox News is the largest haul by weight in the history of fishing. And that seems about right. Par for the course, if only he were that creative. But I like that turn of phrase. It's not clear how much longer this is sustainable. Jordan and others have suggested the impeachment inquiry will complete its work, such as it is, by January. Things are reaching a make or break point, if there ever was such a thing, and Republicans will have to decide whether to impeach with what they have, which isn't much, or put forth an excuse for why they shouldn't do so. It's very possible that over the next few weeks we'll hear voices such as Fox News' Sean Hannity, also an eager promoter of this fishing trip, start giving cover to House Republicans to step back from the edge. Or maybe so much energy has been poured into this thing that they'll just have to go over the edge despite skepticism with their narrow majority. We have signs that Comer is wary. By the way, let me just comment here. Weighing in on the side of just doing it anyway is perhaps the theory maybe under consideration among Republican circles. Well, certainly there's the murdery trader green types who are like, this is very important to my constituency and to my whole claim to be a thing in Washington. You know, I said we were going to do it. I want to deliver that, even if it doesn't work out. And then other theorists might be thinking, you know, even if it doesn't work out, very much like our activity in undermining the American public's confidence in the electoral system, in voting, in the rule of law, etc. What if we undermine their confidence in the impeachment process by doing something so ludicrous and so thinly sourced, but showing, look, impeachment is something you can do on a purely political, purely partisan basis if you want to. If you control the House of Representatives, you can impeach for any reason or no reason. And we want to demonstrate to the American people that impeachment by itself is not necessarily an indication that there's actually evidence of something serious having happened, but it is in fact a frivolous tool that can be used for purely partisan political reasons, so that the next time they have real reason to impeach a Republican president and do so, we can say, see, but that's the process that we turned into a crass joke last time. So obviously, every, Republican accusation being a confession. Yes, we turned it into a crass joke. Now it's a crass joke. Every time it's used, it will be a crass joke, just because that's the way we treated it. So therefore, that's the way you should think they treated it. That might just work. I don't know. I mean, so far it's worked pretty well. Nobody has been removed from office ever with this thing, no matter how many more impeachments we see in the modern era than we ever anticipated before. All right. So where were we? Yes, right. We have signs that Comer is wary. I doubt it. On Tuesday morning, Hunter Biden attorney Abbe Lowell offered to present his client for public testimony on December 13th in response to a subpoena from the Oversight Committee. Now, Lowell's letter was sharply worded, noting Comer's misrepresentations about his client and the committee's failure to substantiate its claims. He noted that Comer's putative interest in rooting out familial corruption didn't, for some reason, extend to Trump's family, which is a good point, but it's an even sneakier point than you think because, as they say here, it is a pointed comment given that Lowell was once Jared Kushner's lawyer. So, yeah, why didn't you haul in the Trump family to illustrate your interest in familial corruption then? And the answer is, I used to work to make sure that that couldn't happen or wouldn't happen when I worked for Jared Kushner. That's kind of a weird thing. But anyway, in a statement, Comer declined to have Biden testify during an open hearing in 2 weeks. Okay, I did figure he would eventually get around to this. I just didn't see it in my initial scan. But yeah, here's the reasoning. Our lawfully issued subpoena to Hunter Biden requires him to appear for a deposition on December 13th, not testimony in an open hearing, but a deposition behind closed doors where we can control the show, essentially. And there is, in fact, no show because it's behind closed doors. We expect full cooperation with our subpoena for a deposition, but also agree that Hunter Biden should have the opportunity to testify in a public setting at a future date. Maybe. I guess but the point is they don't want open testimony at a hearing on December 13th. They want to grill him behind closed doors. That latter offer, notably, is not a hearing, There has been one public hearing as part of the impeachment inquiry, and only one. It was a debacle, introducing no new evidence, but offering many opportunities for Democrats to point out the lack of evidence to undergird the inquiry. Speaking to reporters last month, Comer said, "I don't know what I want to hold any more hearings, to be honest with you," claiming that this was because hearings took so much time. But it is also the case that Comer and his allies have cherry-picked claims from closed-door depositions, like that of Hunter Biden's former partner, Devon Archer, to bolster their case, even while other parts of the same interviews undercut their assertions. What the Republicans fear most is sunlight and the truth, Jamie Raskin, the top Democrat on oversight, said in a statement to the Post on Tuesday, responding to Comer. The situation then is this. Republicans pledged to investigate Biden and have spent months doing so. They amplified dubious, debunked, or diaphanous claims as incriminating, but have failed to construct a credible case against the president. Right-wing media, eager for retribution after Trump's 2 impeachments. Remember when it was the role of the media to say tit for tat in politically driven impeachments is disgusting and we can't have any of it? Well, they built a new media that can't get enough of it. Anyway, right-wing media eager for retribution after Trump's 2 impeachments kept pushing for a formal impeachment. Right-wing legislators complied, applying leverage on McCarthy to make it happen. Then the probe stalled. It remains possible that Biden did something unethical or illegal, and that one of those lines from the fishing boat will reel in a marlin. At this moment, though, it seems obvious that Comer and Jordan are facing the prospect of having to sit down at the dinner table and convince themselves that actually a boot makes a very good meal. The good news is that according to Fox Business reporting, it does. So yum. They can't wait to dig in. All right, there you go. I just thought that was of some interest in updating things, and I love the turn of phrase and how I could just see Jim Jordan out there talking about it by weight. It's the biggest haul in the history of fishing. That was pretty good. All right, let's see. Other things to share with you. Let's see. I saw some stuff in email from The Hill. You know how they love to push their stories in the morning, and something caught my eye here. Let's see if we can't pull this one up and see if it's as interesting as the headline made it look. Gop senators, it says, feel ambushed by Trump's policy promises. Alexander Bolton writes for The Hill. Lots of attention on Trump's wackadoodle plans for overthrowing the actual constitutional government and replacing it with his personal rule. And I guess that's troubling to some Gop senators. Maybe we'll find out who and why in this article. Former President Trump, of course, creating new political headaches for Republicans locked in tightly and highly competitive battles to win back the Senate majority by making extreme statements on health care. Greg touched on that. Immigration and other issues unlikely to play well with swing voters in key states, like total fascism. Trump shook up Republicans on Capitol Hill over the weekend by declaring that if elected president, he would make another run at repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act. That was the main focus of it this morning, right? The comments posted on Trump's media platform, Truth Social, caught Gop lawmakers off guard because they haven't had any serious policy discussions recently about getting rid of the landmark health care law, and there's no consensus within their party on how to replace it. Senate Republican Whip John Thune admitted he doesn't know what Trump's talking about, but neither does Trump. I'm for lowering costs and making our healthcare system more efficient, but I'm not sure. I'd want to know what the proposal is, he said of Trump's comments, but that was the case in 2016 as well, and they didn't seem to care very much that he had no plan and had no capability of coming up with one. Senator Bill Cassidy, the ranking Republican on the Senate Health Committee, was similarly in the dark. It's a narrowly divided Congress. It's unlikely to happen, he said, dismissing the prospect of a push to repeal the Affordable Care Act. John Cornyn, member of the Senate Gop leadership team, said there's no consensus within his party on how to replace the former President Obama's landmark law. Whether we can build a political consensus for something else or not remains to be seen. Susan Collins, deeply troubled by it, of course, was one of 3 Gop senators, along with the late Senator John McCain and Lisa Murkowski, to vote to defeat the bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act in 2017. And she said she would not support repealing protections for people with pre-existing conditions, a key reform of Obamacare. Right on top of that 10-year-old talking point is Susan Collins. Let's see. Okay. So she gives a statement that says the same thing over and over again. Trump's call to revive the effort to repeal and replace Obamacare follows sweeping pledges he's made to end birthright citizenship for the children of immigrants living in the country illegally and to deputize the National Guard to implement mass deportations. And, of course, taking over the military. That didn't get in here. Trump drew criticism last month by claiming the flow of migrants across the southern border is, quote, poisoning the blood of our country. That leads us naturally to Stephen Miller, his immigration advisor, who told the New York Times this month that if elected, Trump would, quote, unleash the vast arsenal of federal powers to implement the most spectacular migration crackdown. Tom Tillis, senator from North Carolina, trying to negotiate a deal with Democrats to stop the flood of migrants across the U.S.-Mexico border, said, while Trump's rhetoric on immigration may play well with the Gop base, it's likely to be a liability with moderate and independent voters in the general election. It's maybe not words that work, he said, of calls for mass deportations. What we're talking about is reasonable, sustainable policy to keep the country safe, he added, contrasting the more measured approach that he and other Senate Republicans are taking to raise the legal standards for asylum requests, i.e. eliminate it, and to change humanitarian parole policies. To me, honestly, mass deportation is probably good primary rhetoric, not good general election rhetoric, he warned. You have to be careful. Not that it's inhumane and not worthy of consideration. And, hey, I'll take it if I can get it, but it might scare people in the general election. But if it doesn't, then I'm for it. Tillis urged Trump to run on his record as president, that's foolish, and point out that encounters between Border Patrol and illegal migrants has more than doubled since compared with Trump's 4 years in office, which of course means that the Border Patrol is out there and doing its job, oddly enough. No open border, nothing. Cornyn, a leading Republican voice on immigration policy, said Senate Republicans won't necessarily play along with Trump's immigration vision if he returns to the Oval Office. That might be nice if I really believe that. But anyway, back to the previous point. It is the fentanyl story all over again. Do you know that even more fentanyl is being stopped at the border these days than was ever the case under President Trump? Yes, I do know that. And also, doesn't that mean we're doing a better job? No, that means there's more coming. Not necessarily. But what it does mean is more is being caught, and I don't know why that's a bad thing. Yeah, well, what about this? Same thing with migrants. Okay, but then same logic. How about that? Oh, crap. Well, never mind. Anyway, a couple more comments here before we jump out of this article. I think one of the things that President Trump learned when he was president is that while the president has lots of power, he's not the only game in town. Maybe what he's talking about is more aspirational. Cornyn, remember him, had said when asked about the prospect of those mass deportations. Earlier this year, Trump pressed House Republicans to impeach Biden despite a lack of clear evidence of wrongdoing or improper conduct. So that whole thing about maybe Republicans in Congress won't play ball if it's not substantively possible to do what he's saying he wants to do. Well, they seem to be playing along with the baseless impeachment, and that's supposed to be a pretty serious thing. Okay, so maybe they will play along. Former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee on Monday voiced the widely shared Gop conventional wisdom when he warned against such an effort to impeach Joe Biden in the House, knowing it's not going to the Senate. There's no point, he warned on Real America's Voice. All it becomes is a political disaster. Trump has rattled Gop senators with other proposals, such as his call to pause U.S. assistance to Ukraine until federal agencies turn over to congressional investigators, quote, every scrap, unquote, of evidence on what Trump insists are the corrupt business dealings of President Biden and his son, Hunter. Link the two together. That's genius. Senate Republicans, led by Senate Gop leader Mitch McConnell, have championed U.S. support for the war in Ukraine as a top national security priority. Let's undo that because Joe Biden, Hunter, laptop. Okay. The party that doesn't control the White House usually follows the lead of its presidential nominee on major policy questions in the run-up to an election, but GOP senators say that's probably not happening next year if Trump wins a nomination. And of course, everyone expects that will be the case. He throws so much spaghetti on the wall. There it is again. I don't think any of it really makes any difference, said Senator Mitt Romney, who also came up earlier today. If Republicans try to defend against all the things he says, that's all they'll spend their time doing, which is why they adopted the policy of, I don't read his tweets. I've never seen Twitter before. I don't know what he says. I don't pay any attention, even though that's all they do. Romney dismissed Trump's call to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I'd love to see his proposal. He served as president for 4 years. Never put a bill forward. Never even put an outline of a bill forward, he said. If it's more than an empty promise, put some teeth into it and show us what you've got. Well, of course, that's never going to happen. And he knows it, and he's right. So, a well-deserved rebuke. I don't know if it's going to have any impact on how the rest of the campaign goes. Probably not. He just loves lying. And oddly enough, Republicans just love falling in line with his lies when push comes to shove. So we'll all stand by and watch that happen. Okay, let's see what happens with George Santos today, and let's see what happens when Justice Putnam takes over the microphone next for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy right here on Netroots Radio. Let's see what he's got on tap here. Oh, let's see Jack Smith right up top. He's going to go on the offense with Pence's testimony. Let's see what he does with it in the courtroom and how long it takes to distill that information into readable form for us.
Netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's what's next. Musk's Cybertruck is already a production nightmare for Tesla. No joke there. James Comer forgets his own behavior after calling out the Dems. And Michigan will join the state-level effort to regulate AI political ads as Congress debates more sweeping regulations ahead of the 2024 elections. All that and more, plus our international roundup next.